From the 2017 Ohioana Book Festival, this is Craft. I'm Doug Dangler, and I'm here today with author Frank Lavin, who has a new book called Homefront to Battlefront that talks about your father, Carl, in World War II, right?
Right. It's a World War II history story, but it's from Ohio, Canton, Ohio, through training into World War II, and it is based around Carl Lavin, my father, who's a high school senior when Pearl Harbor's attacked. So it's a story that appeals to a lot of war buffs, military history buffs, and people just like a good book, a good read. You know, what we saw, Doug, was with these advent of these productions like Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, that I think the American reading public wants to understand the war, but understand it through the GI, understand it through the foot soldier. Mm-hmm. And that's what the book tries to do. What does the what does the everyday soldier feel like and do when he goes into combat?
Okay. So tell me about the research for this, where I'm guessing you talked to your dad, and you learned a lot of new things.
Well, it started as a family history project. It started simply as an internal project, just through an interview with my dad. I got a tape recorder, and it was after seeing Private Ryan and seeing Band of Brothers that I said, I know my dad served, he fought in combat, he was in Europe, and I don't know what unit he was in, I don't know what encounters he had, I don't know if he shot anybody or anybody shot him, I knew nothing. So I said, let me just interview you to understand your duty station, your assignments, your combat activity, and we had about a 30 or 40 page interview out of that. But what happened subsequently that really helped the process along is we found literally several years later, so it was just a family document. Several years later, we find about 200 letters he had written his mother at that time. Mm. So we're able to now transcribe those and interlope those into the original document. But the important contribution then is now we go from unaided memory to aided memory. Because you're talking to a guy at that time in his 70s about what happened. Now we're able to show him letters he wrote at the time, and he's able to respond to it.
How much did that change, what he was talking about?
It changed, well, it elaborated. It provided a lot of color and texture and some new ideas. It didn't change in terms of difference. It did nothing. I mean, he remembered sort of the peak activities. He remembered a half dozen core moments, but when you give him that letter, it goes from remembering a half dozen to remembering 50 things that happened. So it just gave a lot more color to...
When you say the half dozen core memories, what was the one that stood out to you the most? The memory where you went, wow, I didn't know that, or what that must have been tough or something?
Well, for example, there are two different moments in the book where there are friendly fire incidents. And again, if you were ever involved in friendly fire, in one incident, Carl Lavin's on the receiving end of friendly fire, GI shooting him, another end, he's on the giving end, where he's shooting inadvertently, and it turns out to be GI. Fortunately, no deaths, no serious, but boy, that stays in your mind for 70 years. Right? If you say, what are you going to remember about war? So you would not believe what happened, but this happened one day and this other thing happened the other day. So these extraordinary, acts of near-death experiences is what fixes most in your mind. Everybody knows Army food is Army food, and they make you march a lot. And by the way, there's a lot of physical discomfort and a lot of bureaucratic nonsense, but that doesn't necessarily stick in your mind. And after the decades, you say that doesn't even matter. I mean, we sort of expect that, but you remember the acute moments of danger and when people are trying to kill you and when there's enormous physical discomfort and things are really going wrong is what you remember.
What were some of the times when you were talking to your father that, when you were researching for the book Homefront to Battlefront, that he had a lot of difficulty talking about, even all this time later, that you thought maybe we need to break here? Well,
I'll tell you what saved the book, I think, and got us through this point, because he took a very humble approach. His approach from the start was, I'm happy to share this with you, but I don't think it's necessarily noteworthy. I mean, his view was always, look, he did nothing heroic, and the real heroes are the people who didn't come back. And his contribution was what everybody's contribution. I mean, several million American teenagers went off and fought in that war. So why would you focus on one and talk about that one? Mm-hmm. So he was somewhat ambivalent about this project. So what saved it was, it never was a project for the first few years. It was simply a family history, and that's the only reason he bought into it, I think, is because nobody envisioned initially that, let's write a book. If I think I've gone to him and said, there's probably a book here, let's do it, I think he would say, I don't want to be part of it. It just doesn't make sense that there's, again, he's not a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. There's not a John Wayne ending to the story. Mm-hmm. It is sort of the everyman story, but I think what neither of us appreciated is actually that's a more powerful story in some respects because of that, that Saving Private Ryan and the Band of Brothers. And people want to hear about what did the average high school kid from Ohio do when he went into combat.
How did it change you from the time that you started reflecting back on it? You know, you went into it maybe with some preconceived notions, and then you had all this information from your father. You get these letters.
Right.
Where were the letters found?
In the furnace room, just in a cardboard box, on a shelf. You've got a box that has doorknobs and hinges. You've got a box that has screws and bolts. This typical kind of hardware kind of gear. And there's what's that box there? But nobody's looked at that box for a while.
So you get to see all these letters to the grandmother that you may have known. Didn't?
Oh yeah. Oh sure.
Okay.
She. Yeah. Oh, she didn't pass away until about the 1970s. So she passed away quite old. Sure.
So what happened for you as you progressed through this book? What were the changes in your perception of your father, Carl?
Well, 2 or 3 things that happened. One was the duality of a teenager and a soldier, meaning these soldiers are very professional. Boy, are they dutiful. What we know about winning that war, you're really impressed with these kids who go out in death-defying situations daily and do their job. That's really impressive. At the same time, they're teenagers, so they will complain. They will ask their mom for money. They will say, this girl didn't call me back. They will say everything that every teenager in the history of.
He said that in a letter. The girl didn't call me back.
He'll say, the unit is stationed in Britain before they're in combat, right?
Right.
He gets a weekend leave to go to London, and he's writing his mom about weekend wartime London. Rubble. It's a mess. But they're these are kids. He's never been to London before. He's never been to New York City before. Kid from Ohio. And he writes his mom saying, you know what, I met an MP, a female MP, who's one of the nicest persons I've ever met in my life, but I couldn't get her number. And I said, well, she's a smart. It shows you she's a smart MP, because I'm sure every GI is saying, by the way, do you have they're about to go to the front. I'm sure she's not all that interested in, striking up a relationship with a transient American GI. But of course, I'm sure every single GI has a moment in London and sees a beautiful woman who's an MP and says, do you want to grab dinner, right? So I'm sure this happens to her 100 times a day, and she gives guys the brush off. So the only point is you've got both a very mature, very professional, very patriotic kid on one hand. On the other hand, he's still a kid. I'll give you one vignette in that duality. There's one moment where the sergeant tells the squad, listen, we see some movement up on a tree line a few hundred yards out. It's got to be a German patrol. You guys go out and check it out. Take a patrol and check it out. And every kid does it. They do what they're supposed to do. Nobody complains. Nobody says, I did it last time. Nobody says, I'm not feeling good. I forgot, I didn't eat well. Every single kid goes out knowing that, you're going to get 50% casualties. You run into a German patrol, right? They come back a few hours later. Luckily, no encounter. Luckily, the patrol, so nothing happened. At that moment, a battalion medical officer comes by with his records and says, hey, some of you guys are behind on your shots, your measles shots. Every single kid lies. Every single kid says, no, you got your records wrong. I had my shot last week. It just didn't get filed right. I'm allergic to shots, and you can't make
Just because they didn't want the shot.
So it's okay to lie. It's okay to lie to the doctor about the shot because you don't want it.
Right.
But you're going to do your duty. When it's life or death and your country calls on you to go into combat, you'll do it. I just thought that was a really telling reflection that they are fantastic kids in terms of doing their duty, and they're also still kids. They're still adolescents with all of those shortcomings.
Okay. Well, Frank Lavin, I want to thank you very much for talking to me today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And again, the book is Homefront to Battlefront.
Homefront, we ought to hold it up. Homefront to Battlefront. Please take a look. It's a great story of what the GIs did in World War II.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
For more information from my guests, visit www.crafttheshow.com. This is Doug Dangler. Until next time, be creative.